Thank you, everybody in the chamber, for coming to visit, in the gallery, coming to listen, and apologise for the hold-up. And for anybody who's watching streaming, hopefully it's working now and continues to operate. So our next item is item 4, apologies, which we have none. And then item 5, obituaries and congratulations, and I'll go from my right. Councillor Forsyth, I think. Councillor Prime. Councillor Janice.
Yeah, just recently we had the Lucky Era weekend in Myrtleford, which is the celebration of the Italian community, and extremely well attended, and a lot of visitors coming back to our area for that. So the staff and organisers did an extremely good job in the circumstances. I know the weather wasn't as good as they'd like, but nevertheless the numbers were still there. And in particular, the use of recyclable takeaway food containers, and that has proved very popular, and taking away the rubbish that would normally go to landfill.
Thank you, Councillor Janice. And I believe you were helping people work out which bins things should go in.
Yes, I was a bin monitor.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, first of all, I just want to apologise if I stand up today. I've just got some back issues and I actually shouldn't be sitting, so I might be moving, but it's no disrespect to anyone, so apologies. Alexander Cameron has been awarded, a young chap in Myrtleford has been awarded the Alan J. Finlay bursary this year. He was an absolutely sensational candidate, they all were, to interview, and it was really wonderful to see what it is that our youth actually have to offer our community, and I think that they're an untapped resource, and we need to give them more credit with the ideas that they have with up-and-coming projects and things that they feel might be able to change. So big congratulations to Alexander on that one. He was just an outstanding interview and deserves every round of applause for that one. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Just want to congratulations to Dr. Lauren Cusson over at the Mount Beauty Medical Centre. She was recently awarded a fellowship in the Australian Rural and Remote Medicine College. So great commitment and achievement, and well supported by the rest of her colleagues there, and really great for the community as well. So congratulations.
Councillor Keeble.
Very good. Thanks, Mayor Nicholas. I'd like to congratulate all the volunteers that worked on in the last election, just recently, federal election. It was hard to get enough volunteers and staff for those AEC polling booths. That was great. And then obviously I'd like to congratulate everyone who put their hand up for to sit in a seat. It's not easy doing that, and obviously in our area, congratulations to Helen Haynes for being elected the member there. I'd also like to. I'm not really big on kings and queens, but the Queen's 70th was this week, and I think regardless of what you think about that establishment, 70 years in that seat is to be well and truly respected. 50 years or 20 years, it's a long time of 70 years, so congratulations to there. And our ski resorts, it's the first time that I can remember our ski resorts starting before the official time, being flexible. I know that there's a buzz around town with that particular group of commercial owners who are really looking forward to a bumper season after the last couple of years. So I congratulate them for being flexible and willing to open up earlier. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. I was going to pick that one up too. There's been people absolutely scrambling to get the ski resort going a week early. It's the third time since I've been involved, since 1985, that it's opened early. And it's not easy when you've got a plan to go, okay, we're going to get off the ground on next Saturday, and suddenly it's a week early. So, and it's just fantabulous, and let us know. It's excellent. I also wanted to congratulate our Alpine Shire staff once again for their wonderful support for an event in town, which I happened to be involved in. It was the Brighton District Pony Club's combined training event. So we had 70 riders come, but that's great in itself. But the Alpine Shire staff in the background providing more bins, doing the slashing, opening up the electricity for us, just absolutely couldn't do enough to help us. And it was really wonderful to be on the other end of it and seeing just how supportive and helpful our people are. So thank you. Item 6 is declarations by councillors of conflict of interest.
None that I'm aware of.
And none aware at this point in time, but if any time during the meeting you do become aware, then please declare. Item 7 is public questions. We do have one written, which I will take first, and then we'll do questions from the floor. But I would like to remind everybody that the questions are limited to 2 from the floor, and it's a question, not a statement. But I will go to the question that was written. That comes from Trish Cross from Mount Beauty. And I will read the question in full, even though it's quite long, because it's self-explanatory if I do that. Trish wasn't able to attend, so she has written the question. It goes like this. In October 2020, residents in Mount Beauty were sent an email with a brief survey asking to identify future upgrades needed in the community. I submitted a response but have not heard anything further. At the May Council meeting held in Mount Beauty, I note that a petition to extend a footpath on Mummery Road, Myrtleford, was approved. When will upgrades to the footpath needs in Mount Beauty be addressed? In particular, the streets in North Beauty are in need of footpaths, especially for families whose children attend the local primary school and childcare centre. The only street in North Beauty with a footpath is Lakeside Avenue, but many families with young and school-aged children live in other streets in this area and have no access to a footpath. The streets are particularly narrow with overgrown vegetation, and cars are often parked on this area. Families and students are forced onto the narrow road to get to their destination, and this is a safety issue. Is this proposed upgrade to footpath access in this area being planned? And I will ask our Director of Assets, Mr. Jeremy, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, a couple of points in the question on notice. So, first one is a couple of stats. So, in the last 10 years, 22% of all the new path construction that was carried out in the Shire was carried out in Mount Beauty. So that was a length of 1,150 metres of new footpaths which were delivered in Nell Street, Kiwa Crescent, Tennis Court Avenue, Beauty Avenue and Tawonga Crescent. So that's across the last 10 years. The second point I'd like to make is the petition for Mummery Road. So Council adopted some recommendations. They didn't agree to deliver a footpath. They adopted recommendations, one of which was to do some investigatory work. So that's just for clarification there. Back in 2020, Council staff did do some engagement around a footpath plan for Mount Beauty. So they did some analysis in-house where they looked at where the high use, medium use and low use paths were, where the key links were, and they did a piece of engagement with the community to establish a prioritised list of footpaths. What we did a poor job of is communicating the results of that back to the community. So that information fed into Council's footpath register, and it's being used by the staff to prioritise delivery of footpaths, but we missed that step where we went back to the community and said this is what we learnt and this is what we're proposing. So I think the good news is when we looked at the plan for next year, as a result of the work that was done in 2020, the footpath capital project for next year will deliver a section of gravel path adjacent to Lakeside Avenue between Mount Street and the school. So that'll be upgraded to a sealed shed path. Other works in Lakeside Avenue will include widening the existing path between Mount Street and Reserve Drive, constructing a new section of path from Pool Road to the CFA shed and improving the safety of the crossing point at the intersection of Lakeside and Nell Street, as well as improvements to the shared path crossing at Embankment Drive. So we have worked through a process, we've engaged with the community, we've identified where the priorities are and we've actually prioritised for delivery, but I think the key gap, which I'll put my hand up to, is that we haven't communicated to the community very clearly what we're doing in that space.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Are there any questions from the floor? No? Thank you. Mr. Dyer, could you come to the podium and state your name, please, and address where you live?
Is it working? Yep. My name's Ray Dyer and I reside at Nugnug. I've spoken about this on several occasions before, but I'm very concerned about the leadership communications and accountability with this Alpine Shire. And I've been dealing with the Shire for many, many years. Number one, I have many issues, mind you, which I've spoken about, and I haven't even had any response from the Shire. One of them was an electric bike that was taken, or I should say stolen, at Ovens. And when I brought it up, when the police said that they didn't give the Shire permission to take it, and the rangers said to me
Mr. Dyer,
over the telephone,
Mr. Dyer, there's a letter that I know that you've been sent that has asked you not to talk about the bicycle at a meeting again.
about the bike.
Yeah, and and one more thing. We're after a question, not statements.
No, I was going to ask, this bike has been ongoing for quite a while,
I don't.
and I have no accountability from the Shire whatsoever over it.
And it won't be resolved as a question at the council meeting.
All right, well, can we have a meeting with the Mayor or the CEO to discuss it? Because it's been ongoing. When I had a meeting, I had a meeting with Charlie and Ron Forsyth. They're back about 6 months ago. And Charlie said that bike was returned. That's how much he knew about it.
So the question is, can you have a meeting?
The question is, when do I talk to somebody about that bike?
If you put a request in writing, then we will move forward on that.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, the second one, I'm trying to think what it is now.
You can put that in writing too.
Pardon?
You can put that in writing.
I can put that in writing too, because I've spoken here on many occasions and I've been totally ignored, especially when I brought up the bike and I was told by the Mayor at the time, take it up with the police. When the police turned around and said that they didn't give permission, but the rangers said they did. I was going to the police to charge the Shire with theft. So I'll put a letter in and we'll sort it out.
We can't resolve it here.
Pardon?
We can't resolve that matter tonight here, so...
No, I didn't expect so. I'd like to tee up a meeting then. The question is, can I have a meeting with the Mayor and the CEO about that and a few other issues also?
Put that in writing? And
I'll put it in writing, no problem at all.
Get back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice night.
You too. Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Are there any further questions from the floor? The next item is presentation of reports by officers, and we start with our Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Clark. Contracts approved.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. There was 3 contracts approved in the last month between council meetings by the outgoing CEO and myself. The supply and delivery of 1 new wide area mower, the Dargo High Plains installation of seasonal road closure gating, and the promotional campaign for Dinner Plain. The recommendation is that the contracts approved by outgoing Chief Executive Officer and the Acting Chief Executive Officer be noted. Thank you.
Moved, Councillor Forsyth, seconded Councillor Janus. Any discussion? Questions? All those in favour? Carried. The next item is moving on to 8.2. Will be presented by the Director of Assets, Mr. Jeremy. It is a petition about Alpine Better Places, Harriettville. Thank you, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to inform Council and to provide a response to a petition relating to the Alpine Better Places Harriettville project. The Alpine Better Places Harriettville project commenced in March 2020, and key items in the design brief included improving streetscapes, including wayfinding signage, paths, tracks and trails to better connect the town's assets and facilities, integrated landscape treatments and improved parking options, and improved open space reserves, including upgraded and/or additional facilities and amenities. So what I've outlined through the report that I'm presenting to Council, and I think it's the crux of the petition that come in, is the extent of the engagement that we've carried out on this project, which is extensive and has occurred over a long period of time using a variety of different methods. So through the Alpine Better Places, Bright, Porpunka and Myrtleford projects, we delivered 2 formal rounds of engagement, and we were requested by the Harriettville community to deliver a 3rd round, which we did. So we delivered 3 rounds of engagement, and also we went out to public consultation on a draft plan. We engaged in good faith, that's our belief, in good faith with the residents of Harriettville, At each stage in the process, we listened to their concerns and we updated the plans on the basis of the feedback that we received. And we believe that we have a plan which represents what we were told through that process. However, we have received a petition. It does have 105 signatures on it. We've also, in parallel with this, received a letter from the Toronto Dredge Reserve Committee. So they're the land managers on which we're developing the Toronto precinct. And on the basis of the request for us to have one more look, what we're proposing through this process is to retest with the community before we move straight forward into the detailed design, is to retest each of the key components that we're delivering and ensure that we've got it right and ensure that there's community support for those components. So what we're not proposing is a very large and extensive piece of engagement. We're just proposing a key test to make sure that each of the elements that we're proposing has the support of the Harrietville community. We're going to run that over a period of probably the next 2 months. So we'll go out through a variety of different means again, through paper. We'll do a paper survey. We'll do an online survey and ensure that we've hit each resident and ratepayer in Harrietville and give them the opportunity to provide that feedback. Once we have that feedback, we'll use that to inform the way forward into the award of detailed design contracts and delivery of the project. So the other point I made here, we have secured funding for this project. So we were successful in securing funding to deliver. This was through the Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Fund, successfully delivered over $1 million of external funding to deliver this project without a co-contribution from council. So we have signed up to a grant agreement to deliver the project on the basis of the designs that were adopted by council. So we're committed to a timeframe and committed to a budget and delivery to the Australian government. And we're proposing to stick to that commitment at the same time as giving the community an opportunity just to flag if there is something that we have missed through that process. So the recommendations are as listed, that we note the petition to stop the plans for the Alpine Better Places Harrietville project, acknowledge the extensive community engagement and consultation which has been undertaken to date on the project. We conduct a community survey, with the survey results being used to refine the design and reconfirm the scope of work for the detailed design of all 3 precincts, and proceed with the development of the detailed design and subsequent construction of the Toronto Dredge Hole precinct in accordance with the terms of the funding agreement, and advise the main proponent of the petition of council's decisions.
Moved by Councillor Hughes, and would you second, Councillor Janice?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Looking through the report and the discussions we've had on this one so far, there has been a massive amount of community consultation at various stages throughout this process. So the weighing up, there has been opportunity. It's unfortunate that it's come to the stage where a petition has had to be done because there's been a level of people feeling unheard, if that's what it is. But, you know, coming up with a plan on the next stages and how it can progress from there, I think that's a really good active position that council can take with the community of Harrietville, because they are a really tight-knit community with some good views for the future of their town. So I'm all for this process.
Councillor Janice.
A couple of questions, Mr. Jeremy. Who does that Toronto Dredge land belong to?
That is Crown land. So the Toronto Dredge Reserve Committee is a DELP-appointed committee of management who manage the land on behalf of the Crown.
So it's not ours?
It's not council land now.
No. Okay, so, and what time frame have we got to deliver this project?
We've got a complete delivery and acquit the project by March 2024.
So this process that we, in the recommendation, will that hinder the progress of the task at hand?
It'll result in a small delay to our ability to award a detailed design contract, but we will continue to progress the development of the contract documentation at the same time as we carry out this engagement. So it's really only the scope that would change. The rest of the contract documentation, the rest of the process can move in parallel. But you're right, it does introduce a slight delay at the start of this project.
And the works to be done on Toronto Lodge, at the completion of those works, who will be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of those works?
The works that are delivered will become council's responsibility to maintain and renew.
Okay, thank you. And I do commend your staff on the amount of engagement being involved, particularly with the Brighton, Myrtleford Better Places projects. This The engagement here has been outstanding, in my view.
Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Jeremy, is dot point 4 predicated upon dot point 3 or not?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. In my view, representing the staff, we're proposing to move forward with this project, and really what we're doing is providing an opportunity to fine-tune the design. So yes, we're moving forward with secured funding on behalf of council, and our position is that we will deliver the project. But this provides an opportunity to tweak the design as we head into that detailed design stage.
Have you got a set time frame for getting this community survey back? Are you giving yourself 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
So what we would like, we think it's fair to give the community a clear 2 weeks in which to consider and provide their response. So we recognise, however, that there's a time frame to get the survey to them, and then a time frame if they mail it back to us for it to get back to council staff. So it all starts adding up. Once you provide that clear 2 week time frame in the middle, you've got to allow posting time either side of that in order to...
So can you put a definite date on this to make it so that we can keep the process going? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so my assessment is it's going to take us 2 months to work through this process to a conclusion by the time we reach a decision from council.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We'll take that one to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next item is 8.2.2, proposed fish passage structure at Bright Weir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report relates to a project which is being led by the North East Catchment Management Authority, so that's NECMA, to establish a fish passage structure at the Bright Weir. In doing so, removing one of the remaining artificial barriers preventing fish from migrating into the upper reaches of the Ovens catchment. So I'll start by describing the benefits to waterway health. So this is the feedback we've received from NECMA. So the Ovens River is home to one of the most significant populations of native fish in the Murray-Darling Basin, including several threatened species, including the silver perch, flat-headed galaxias, the trout cod, the Macquarie perch and the Murray cod. It is one of only 2 rivers in the basin with a near-natural flow regime, and providing fish passage at the Bright Weir is identified in the NECMA Regional Waterway Strategy as a lead action. So delivering a fishway at this passage will allow an increase in movement from the Bright Weir to the headwaters of the Ovens River of 42 kilometres of waterway on the Ovens and an additional 120 kilometres of tributaries off the Ovens. So in NECMA's feedback to council, this is a significant project. It brings a significant benefit to waterway health and fish populations. So if I roll the clock back in 2016, at the August 2016 council meeting, and this was the last time this topic was brought before council for a decision, and council determined through a recommendation to support NECMA with an application to secure funding to construct a fish passage structure at the Bright and the Porpunka Weirs, providing they had sufficient budget to do so and to ensure that it was sympathetic to the environment that it was located in, and provided that they could do so safely. So that was the decision back in August 2016, and at that time council committed, if those conditions were met, to taking on ownership of the fish passage structure at Bright and Porpunka and all the associated operational renewal costs that came with ownership of that asset. And the final recommendation was that officers work closely with NECMA during the implementation of that fish passage structure. So in the intervening years since 2016, that's exactly what's happened. NECMA have secured funding to deliver a fish passage structure at the Bright Weir alone, not the Porpunka Weir. So they secured $2.6 million back in May 2020. And since then, they've been working through a process of developing concepts designs. They've established a project control group, of which council was a member, to ensure that they were meeting the requirements for it to be safe, operational, and that we could maintain it at an acceptable cost. NECMA's now reached a position with that work that they're looking for council to give them essentially the green light to move ahead, finalise the detailed design. So they're about 80% complete on detailed design, and they're looking to move that to 100% completion, confirm the costing for the project, and then move into tendering the works to move into construction. As part of that, they're proposing a community engagement campaign. So subject to council's decision tonight, they'll move into a phase of advising the community on the works and what's proposed and the way forward. What I've outlined in this report is a number of issues that are discussed as part of a decision to move forward with the fish passage. Most of them are straightforward. The one that probably needs some reflection on is the risk to public safety. So back in 2016, Council determined to support NECMA, provided that NECMA could demonstrate that any proposed in-stream infrastructure would result in no increase in risk to public safety. So a lot of the focus over the recent months from Council's team and its involvement in the project control group has been around exactly that point. Does the fishway introduce additional risk to the public? If so, how can we manage that risk, and can we manage it to a level that is acceptable to Council through its ownership and operation of the waterhole? It's been a really challenging subject to work through. We've had support from external experts in the field, as have NECMA. We've reached a position, I think, where Council staff believe that there is an increased risk, so we haven't managed to reach a position where we're confident that there is no increased risk associated with, particularly with the trash rack that is needed as part of the fish structure. So in that respect, we haven't achieved what was asked by Council back in 2016, which was to demonstrate that there's no increase in risk. However, what we've worked through is a process to establish, well, how much risk are we adding relative to what is already exists in the water hole? Through having a dredged hole, which we dredge a hole to provide a safe area for people to use the jumping board, and we encourage people into the swimming pool. So Council officers have reached a position where they believe that we've done everything, or we've identified every measure which is reasonably practicable to manage the risk with the introduction of a fish passage at that location. The one option which I wanted to flag to you, and which I know we've had a discussion offline, is around the bigger opportunity to reduce risk in that location is to remove the weir in its entirety. That, when you look at the risk, the way in which to manage risk, eliminating the risk is the most robust solution, and eliminating the risk at the Bright River Pool is essentially removing the weir, returning the river back into its natural state. So Council officers haven't been through a robust process of testing with the community how much support there would be for a proposal to remove the weir. So at this point, we're proceeding on the basis that a fishway installation with the weir in existence is the way forward. But I want to flag to you that if we were to be taking the most robust and strong approach to this, we would probably be having a discussion around removal of the weir rather than proposing to add infrastructure onto the existing weir. So the recommendations before you this evening are to note and commend the collaboration which has taken place through the development of the detailed design for the fish passage structure at the Bright Weir. To note the conclusion of the design safety review that all reasonably practicable precautions have been identified to manage safety associated with the operation and maintenance of the proposed fish passage structure, and that with the identified controls and barriers in place, its operation is not considered likely to result in a situation which is prohibitively dangerous for members of the public or staff involved in the operational maintenance of the structure. That Council engages Life Saving Victoria to reassess the operations at the seasonal swimming pool based on the latest information that we have, in order to verify that all appropriate barriers and controls have been identified, supports the North East Catchment Management Authority in its broad engagement of the local community and interested stakeholder groups before construction commences, and continues to work closely with the North East Catchment Management Authority during the implementation of the fish passage structure.
So moved. Councillor Forsyth, and seconded Councillor Prime. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions, Mr Jeremy. And thank you for pointing out in the last part of that presentation the actual reason for the fish passage to be put in, and that is the fact that we have some weir walls in there which maintains the swimming hole, which is, as you've said, it's a dredged hole. The other thing that happens in that area is that there is a very well populated and utilised rotary slide, which is one of the Bright Rotary Club's major fundraising events for the year, and gives a lot of enjoyment for the users, but also brings in a lot of money, which comes back into the community as well. Is there a possibility to actually get rid of the weir walls and dredge out underneath where the rotary slide is, to create a hole there that could be utilised if we're worried about a decrease or something that's going down in waterway?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So we haven't determined a precise technical solution to that issue. However, feedback from my technical team is that should Council determine to remove the weir, and that would currently leave the rotary slide unusable, there are potential technical solutions which could be implemented to deliver a effectively a smaller seasonal pool at that location for use by the Rotary Slide.
Without creating a weir.
Without creating a weir across the whole river. So the technical solution hasn't been landed on, but the team feel reasonably confident they could find some way of defining a small localised pool there, building some infrastructure, maybe pumping up into the pool, or maybe providing a feed from further up the river to keep the pool filled. So that is a piece of work that we haven't done in detail, but we have thought about in concept.
Okay, so my follow-up question, if I may, please, pardon me, is if this fish passage, and it's a tongue twister, is put into place, and I believe it's 2 million something, it becomes our asset for maintenance. If this council or the next council decide that they would like to get rid of the weir wall because we've either had a tragedy, death or whatever, or it's just there's too much risk involved, and we take the weir wall down, what then happens to the fish passage?
So if council wanted to re-look in the future at the infrastructure that's in the Bright River, there are 2 steps you could take. The first is relatively simple, and that is just not to install the weir boards. So you would leave the physical infrastructure in place, so the existing weir, the fish passage, and the bridge would remain in place. You would just not put the weir boards in the summer. So essentially you wouldn't end up with the swimming hole. So that's the first step. In that case, half of the fish passage would work. So the fish passage is designed for 2 river levels. So it's got a lower exit point at the permanent weir height, and it has a higher exit at the top of the weir boards. So if you don't install the weir boards, it just operates off the lower ledge. So there would be probably no requirement to change anything in that scenario. You just determine not to put the weir boards in. The second scenario would be the more extreme scenario, where you determine you want to return the river back to its natural state, thus eliminating the weir completely. So you would be removing the concrete weir. I think at that point there would be no requirement at all for a fish passage structure at all in the river if you didn't have a weir, because the only reason the need exists for the fish passage is to overcome the step that the weir presents. So at that point, if council had determined to remove all the infrastructure, I think you would then determine to remove the fish passage structure at that point as well.
Thank you. My only other observation is that there are native fish above the weir and below the weir, so they're already there. I've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jeremy, for that extensive background. That was very much appreciated. So just noting here that with the funding, it was originally meant to be delivered this June, as in now. If this did proceed tonight, do we have an idea of when this might be up and running by, or?
So my understanding is that NECMA have negotiated with their funder a proposed extension of the funding agreement. In order to lock that in, they need a decision from council this evening. I'm not 100% certain on the new end date that they've defined. However, if this was a council project, we would probably from this point be looking at a minimum of 12 months to be able to deliver from an 80% complete detailed design, and probably more like 18 months to 2 years to get through that process. But yeah, I don't have details around what is it that NECMA's negotiated as an extension to their funding agreement.
No, thank you. That's completely fine. Just to commend the collaboration here, obviously this has been going on since 2016 and probably some thought put into it prior to that. NECMA involved, proposal here to engage Lifesaving Victoria to reassess again as well, and just noting that, design safety review, that all reasonably practical precautions have been identified to manage safety associated. So I think a fair bit of thought and process has gone into that. So well done on the collaboration there. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor. Mr. Jeremy, great report, and I really appreciate the alignment between the parties around pursuing public safety and an environmental outcome as well. It probably does go to the long-term sustainability of the existing seasonal pool. Just a question on recommendation or item 3. Engaging with Lifesaving Victoria now, is there a risk of new costs to council, would you say, in terms of what they recommend based on the proposed design and that NECMA has landed on?
I don't believe there is, and I believe the outcome of the Life Saving Victoria review may flag additional control measures, but I don't think it would result in a fundamental redesign of the fish passage structure. So we've done a lot of work with NECMA on what that design looks like, and Life Saving Victoria have been involved through their engagement with NECMA and Alluvium, the consultant, through that process. So I think when we engage Life Saving Victoria, they won't be looking at something new and saying, here's some opportunities. They'll be looking at the operations of that structure within the pool environment and saying, you know, for example, signage, boom gates, barriers, you know, what are the practical operational measures that we maybe have missed through the process that we've looked at so far. But I wouldn't anticipate there'd be structural changes or significant changes to the infrastructure that accommodates the fish passage.
And just one follow-up, if I may. Is the current model there in terms of lifeguards and attendance by certified lifesavers, is that's a paid position over the seasonal period, or is there scope for volunteers to help on that front, you know, in terms of additional controls, additional lifeguards? Just thinking out aloud.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. So we have contracted out the lifeguarding services to Belgravia as part of the suite of things that they provide for us in our swimming pools. It's a paid position, and their part of their contract is the obligation to provide lifeguards under the service agreement that we have with them. Whether they consider the use of volunteers is a question for Belgravia.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Havercroft.
Councillor Keeble, you keep going. Oh, you done?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
I'm just, in that last answer there as well, is it true that Lifestream, that we do not need to, Belgravia do not need to put lifeguards at a river?
So the advice that we've taken from Life Saving Victoria previously, and we only had an assessment done in 2021, hence additional signage that has gone up over the summer season, is that where we've added infrastructure, we have a responsibility to take measures. Whether they include lifeguards or not is a decision that we've always taken as a council, and in recent times that we will put lifeguards on there. And when we took the contract to Belgravia, that formed part of the service that we had with them. So I'd have to take it on notice whether we absolutely have to, but it's certainly been our tried and tested practice to do that over many years.
All right, thank you. And my other question or wondering to Mr. Jeremy is, how long will it take your officers to work out the risk assessment of those boards? Do you need a couple of months, half a year? So going back to your last discussion,
I'm not clear on the question when you say work out the risk assessment.
So the conversations we've had recently about the risk appetite for those, for the wooden weirs, the boards, that maybe we need to do some more work around that to ascertain the risk level.
Do you mean installing them and...
Installing them or not installing
and
them?
managing them, yeah.
How long would it take to do that bit of work? Or it's done?
So are you, what I think your understanding is you'd like us to do a piece of engagement to understand the two options. One is not putting the boards in versus putting the boards in, is that correct?
Yeah.
To understand support or otherwise for not putting the boards in?
Not the support, the risk.
The risk.
So going back to the fish ladder, part of the 2016 was we'll put a fish ladder in if the risk levels aren't increased.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that the risk levels will be slightly increased by having a fish ladder in. So I'm wondering, you know, if we get rid of the boards and the weir, we don't need a fish ladder. And so what's the, not the risk, I get that, you know, and this is a tricky conversation for the Shire in regards to tourism, and that, you know, that part of Bright there gets a lot of tourists and people come and swim in it, and same with the locals, they swim in it. So I'm not talking about the social risks, it's just more the actual risk of having the weir there.
So...
And how long would that take for us to have that?
We already know that installation and removal of the weir boards is one of the highest risk activities that our asset maintenance team deliver. We already know that the river pool is a risky environment because of the number of assisted rescues we have within our river pool. So I think the risk it presents is quite high. I think the discussion is perhaps around council's risk appetite, and does that risk, where does that sit relative to your appetite? And if council's got a lower risk appetite, then maybe we should be pursuing looking at the lower risk option, which is looking at eliminating the weir altogether. Yeah. But I think I've reflected to the councillors previously, the council staff would love to eliminate that weir and deliver a low risk environment, not have to put the weir boards in and not have to manage a seasonal pool with a team of lifeguards. We'd love that scenario.
So I'm just wondering, that conversation has come reasonably, this is probably to my fellow councillors, that conversation has come reasonably late to the table in some ways. I'm just wondering if, I don't know when NECMA need to really know whether they need to know tonight or whether they can hang on for a little bit, whether we adjourn this for a month or two. I'm probably too late because we've already got the recommendation.
Just on that, Councillor Keeble, I think we put aside that risk assessment because of the pandemic, where there wasn't normal usage of the seasonal pool for the last couple of years. So I don't think the officers had a chance to actually thoroughly, because we were looking at the number of assisted rescues and or call-outs or whatever, but I don't think they could make a really good recommendation back to us regarding that. So I don't know whether we need to, I don't know whether we should be delaying this, voting on it as it is, or just saying no.
Okay, go for the vote.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you.
If we take the weir boards out in Bright, does that mean we take them out in Porpunka as well? Like we're creating the same scenario there, which in turn would then create no need for a fish ladder in either of the areas that have been discussed to date.
That is true.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I like the logic in your thinking.
I mean, that is true.
Yeah, it is true. If you determined, I guess, that the establishment of a seasonal pool in Bright was an unacceptable risk relative to your risk appetite, and you wanted to remove the weir structure, then the argument would apply equally to Porpunka. The only difference, I think, in Porpunka, we see fewer assisted rescues in Porpunka. I think the demographic of who's using the Porpunka River Pool is slightly different to Bright. We don't have the infrastructure, the jumping board, which we dredge down to 3 metres deep, so we're not creating as risky an environment in the Bright River Pool. In Porpunka, it's a less risky environment that we create than we do in Bright.
So does NECMA have an opportunity to, does this have to be installed in Bright specifically, or can it does?
Absolutely, yes. We've tested that with NECMA, and absolutely this funding is directed at Bright, and there's no opportunity to redirect it to Porpunka.
Okay, because I think this whole, like this, I'm born and bred local, and it's always been weird. Like the weir boards have always been up, and to take that away from Bright as a whole, even Porpunka, it's bigger than what you think. You remember the silver slide concept that was here a few months ago? Times that by 100, and that's what you'd be looking at. So I think it's not an easy discussion to have if we were to vote on this based on removal of weir boards. So I don't know, do we? I mean, it has to be, how quickly have they said that they can deliver this project if we were to vote on it?
So NECMA has advised us they're at risk of losing the funding. So when they signed up to the original funding agreement, they committed to deliver it by June 2022, which is now. So they're already running a long way behind, and I think they've stretched that funding relationship as far as they can push it. So if council wasn't to determine a decision tonight that gave them a clean go ahead, I think there's a very high risk that the funding would drop away, and there's other priorities for the government to fund different infrastructure projects.
I've got a question for clarity. You have discussed it already tonight, Mr. Jeremy, but there's a 2 stages in the fish ladder, so if the boards didn't go in, we'd still need a fish ladder.
That's correct.
But if you took out the whole lot, we wouldn't need a fish ladder. And at Porpunka, is there a concrete structure as well? Yep. So
yes,
that would,
it's the same. It's the
so
same.
that would need a fish ladder for the little
correct.
bit anyway. Yep. Okay. And my other question is around if we took out the weir boards in Bright, do you think that the people who would currently go to Bright would therefore go to Porpunka, or would we have to remove them both at once? Sorry. I think it makes, I know you can't answer it, but it's a,
Predict our tourists' behaviour, unfortunately.
no.
Yeah, I suspect some of them would, but you'd probably lose. A lot of people would choose not to go down to the to go down to the river pool at all, rather than travelling to Tonka. There's lots of other spots along the river that provide natural swimming holes. I suspect you'd see a dispersal up and down the river to those unmanaged swimming holes that we've got across the Shire. They'd perhaps become more popular.
Would have a reduction in gastro.
maybe. just get spread. Councillors, Councillor Forsyth.
Last
Yep,
comment.
absolutely.
Can I say something, Madam Mayor?
Oh, sorry. Yes. So you went waving your hand around, yes, Mr. Councillor Janice?
Just being respectful to the other councillors before Councillor Forsyth has his right of reply. So what we're voting on actually is the recommendation before us at the moment. Now, I've sat through the briefing session that we had from NECMA and a specialised authority with risk assessment. Each and every day we live with risk in our life. Is our society becoming more risk adverse as we go along because of fear of being sued or whatever? The swimming pool in Bright has been a generational area and a destination. I take the point of Councillor Forsyth in relation to the Rotary slide, where it does provide an income stream for the local service club to deliver services back within the community. But on the other hand, not all parties can afford to put a family of 4 or 5 through that slide each and every day, and there is a cost involved in that. Sorry? Every 10 minutes. So, environmentally, there is a need for some sort of structure for fish to traverse up and down the river. And initially this was to be done in Footpath, but government have stressed in their funding agreement that it'll be delivered in Bright. It's my understanding of the briefing.
Could I just clarify that?
Yes.
So that it wasn't originally Tonka ahead of Bright. I think NECMA were pitching for both.
For both?
Yeah.
So government decreed that if there is funding, it will happen in Bright. And I understand that there's a risk associated with our staff putting those weird boards in and out. We do need to have a public swimming hole that can be controlled as well because of the demographic of the people who visit our area have got very low skills in personal safety in the swimming area. So if we have what we have there, we should bear the cost of providing lifesavers. And I understand, it would be very much a cost saving to council if we don't have them there. We don't have to provide lifesavers. But there's a little bit more to life than just cost. And we're looking at the enjoyment of families and people using our riverways and still enabling the environment to act in as natural as condition as we can. And I'm sure that the engineers, and I'm comfortable with the briefing that we had, that the engineers have provided the safest construction that they can at this point. But I also like the idea of engaging Lifesaving Victoria to do further assessment for us. And a lot will depend on that. One of the things, and I did bring that up previously, the briefing session, is people who think that they might catch a fish or two sneakily through the fish trap hanging around there. And I suppose in the conditions we should have no
A few
fishing
barbecues nearby.
in that area. I know that there's a risk involved, but there is also a greater need for public to have an area where they can safely swim as well. And we have had some drownings in our area in the last few years with areas that have been unsupervised and are still popular swimming holes. So, and as I said, some of the demographic of people that we have here don't have some of the same skill set for swimming or water safety as we do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Councillor Forsyth, right a
Look,
reply.
yeah, I'll wrap it up really quickly. Councillor Janus, I've just crossed out all the things I was just about to say regarding unsupervised river pools and the demographics of the people that do actually come and visit here, and the fact that we've got a different demographic probably swimming in the Bright pool as opposed to the Port Punket pool, which is probably a lot more local country people. And the only other thing I'd comment on is that if I vote in agreement with all of this, it's simply due to the fact that we've got a pool there and we'd like to retain the pool. Thank you.
Okay, so we haven't had a motion to defer, so we will take this one to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as it stands? Thank you. Carried. And we move on to, thank you everyone, it's a really good discussion, and I think risk is a really, we really do need to be careful that we've managed it as best we can, so good to bring up all those points. The next item is 8.2.3, Asset Plan 2022 to 2032.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this one is a little more mundane after that excitement. This report relates to the adoption of the Asset Plan 2022 to 2032, which has been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020. So Section 92 of the Local Government Act requires all Victorian councils to develop, adopt and keep in force an asset plan, and the plan must be adopted by the 30th of June 2022. And it's a strategic document that informs the community about how councils' infrastructure assets will be managed and maintained to support achieving the community vision and the council plan objectives. We've put our draft plan out for community comment and through public exhibition. We received one comment, so it hasn't generated a high level of interest. And we've had a discussion with the submitter of that comment, which was the Mount Beauty Airport Association, and agreed a way forward the Port Punket Airport Association, and agreed a way forward in respect to that comment. So there being no more comments, there have been no more substantive changes to the document, although we have picked up the edits that the council has provided to us. So thank you for that input as well. Recommendation this evening is that council notes that one formal submission was received, which did not result in change to the document, and that we've provided feedback to that submitter, adopts the asset plan and signs and seals the plan at the appropriate stage of this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble, and seconded Councillor Hughes. Councillor Keeble.
No, look, it's a massive bit of work, really, the asset plan for 10 years, and it has to be in there for 10 years for the financial plan, so it's good to sign that off. There's a lot of things we need to get done over the next 10 years. Thanks for all the work.
Councillor Hughes.
Is it safe to say that in the process of this, that there's been things that have come up that have created an easier process for staff?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question there, Councillor.
Well, before now, so it's the asset plan that's been developed. How many have been done before now?
So this is a new requirement of the Local Government Act 2020. So in-house we've developed a series, they're in draft at the moment, but a series of asset management plans. So those are more detailed plans that describe how each of our key infrastructure assets will be managed. The asset plan might be seen as sitting on top of those. So it's a summary of the key information that we think is of use to the public and to the councils in describing the management of those assets. It's also aligned with the financial plan, so where you have financial projections in your financial plan, they feed up into the asset plan as well. So it's a kind of a summary document. One of the interesting points to note with this plan is there was no requirement through development of the first plan to engage deliberatively with the community. Subsequent revisions of this plan, we are required to engage the community through a deliberative process. So we will need to give some thought to how do we identify through the plan what are the things that are of interest to the community, how do we communicate those concepts and those ideas and try and bring it to life a little bit, because it is a bit of a dry document at the moment. So we'll give some thought to that as it comes up for its next revision of the document.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mayor. I note in this asset plan that there is no mention whatsoever of actual asset sales. Is that something that is not a requirement under the 2020 Act, or is it something that we just haven't even looked at and you have not been able to present to us?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So we have no formal and agreed plans for asset sales agreed with council. Therefore, that is reflected through the financial plan, which does not show us selling assets into the future, and that feeds into the asset plan, which also does not show us selling assets. So where we have existing assets, they're identified for renewal at the end of their useful life. So that's the provision that's contained within the financial plan, rather than disposal.
I have a question for clarification. Is there a review period provided in the Act, or do we have a review period in the plan, or what is it?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So we're required to review and have this document re-adopted after each election of council. So it's a 4-year review cycle. I can't remember exactly when it is, but it's post-council election. It may be the 30th of June following the council election period, but it's every 4 years.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? We'll take the recommendation to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. And we move on to Director of Corporate Performance. Thank you, Helen Havercroft. And item number 8.3.1, Budget Report Quarterly Review.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this, the purpose of this budget report quarter review is to provide Council with an overview of the Q3 results and an update of the performance forecast for the full year budget of 21-22, so the year that we're currently sitting in as we roll towards the end of June. So Council is forecasting a full year surplus of 11.7, $5.1 million higher than the original budgeted surplus of 6.6 million. The principal drivers for that change are an early receipt of 75% of our 22-23 financial assistance grants of $3 million. We always receive some early, but we don't know until quite late in the day what percentage we will get early, and this year was higher than previous years, 75%, actually slightly higher, perhaps now at 78%, we've worked out subsequent to this report. We got additional unbudgeted funding for the Bogon High Plains Backspot project of 1.3 million and additional bushfire recovery funding of $1 million. The list goes on. We've been extremely fortunate to receive significant additional grant funding this year, which has supplemented that boost in our surplus come the year end. Obviously, we're going to spend it in subsequent years, and some of that will play out when you review the budget document later this evening. So the recommendation this evening is that Council receives and notes the budget report quarter review for the period ending 31st of March 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Keeble. Seconded Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor Nicholas. The reduction in the Dargo High Plains Road, I read that the works have been deferred. Having driven that recently, I think the Mayor drove her I-30 on it too, or some other small car.
No, the electric car.
Electric car. It was deferred because...
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So this is a multi-year project with multi-million-dollar costs. The staff have re-looked at what is the logical sequence in which to deliver the work, what to do in year one and what to do in the second year, and they've changed that split through the year to provide a more logical delivery of the works. So what you've seen delivered are the early works, so some grading and tidying up of the road. What is to come are far more significant drainage and road reconstruction works on the poorer section of the road.
Yeah, I've seen some of the culverts sitting there. They've obviously been helicoptered in or dropped off in the truck. Thank you. And the other quick question I had is the Tonka Caravan Park upgrade. Is it still on schedule for October? Opening?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So we are currently on schedule to meet that commitment from a capital works perspective. Previously, conversations at briefings and at this meeting were that we were working through the process of determining the expressions of interest and getting a lease agreed with an operator. We were hoping that expression of interest would go out yesterday, perhaps, yesterday. And we held off that following legal advice that we hadn't quite worked out the positioning between having a construction site and mobilisation potentially of an operator on site at the same time. So we've deferred that EOI until next Wednesday. We know that we've had some early interest. People tried to download documents that didn't exist, so which is exciting for us. And we are working towards a 28 October deadline still.
Okay.
But I think it's realistic that there may be slippage in that at some point, but we are unable to define what that looks like at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes was the second. Oh, Councillor Kelly, sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor.
Lost my papers.
Look, just a point around process. I think this report is seen by two of our committees as well, in terms of the Audit and Risk Committee and also the Finance Committee. I think it's important to have a surplus, but I would stress for those that are looking at it carefully, much of that surplus is around delays to completion of capital works or those early grants that have been received. So, to me, the budget's in good shape, but we may be looking creatively at that surplus in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Janis.
Just the item in the issues section, unbudgeted funding for new employees from the Apprentices Support Australia of 0.2 million. Have we initiated any of that at this? Have we put on any apprentices? Are we going to?
We have, thank you, Councillor Janis, we haven't put on any apprentices. Some of the employment costs that have fallen out of this Q3 report are as a result of journal end errors that were identified between Q2 and Q3. So some of the change in the numbers between Q2 and Q3 in this report are reflecting the errors that were picked up between those two periods, thanks to the finance team doing some close scrutiny of how we prepare for the next year, identified some issues that we'd had with the last year end. So we haven't had any apprentices in this year, no. And some of the principal reasons for the change resulted from not closing off journals with Working Victoria, and last year we received Working for Victoria funding and took on additional people as a result of that, some of which are still employees with us. But that journal didn't get flipped at the year end, so it's just a rebalancing of those issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comment or questions? No? Take that to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. Be carried. Next item is the quarterly performance report, council plan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is our second quarterly performance report against our, I think it's not probably new anymore, but the council plan. So this is our opportunity to both report against our LGPRF targets, but also to provide an update for councillors and others about how we are tracking against our major initiatives and other principal projects that we have sitting within our council plan. So in previous council plans, they very neatly aligned with how our departmental structure was internally as a group of officers. This council plan isn't. So has created actually quite a lot of conversations and collaboration in how we make sure we are still meeting our targets that are set by others and that we've set ourselves in the council plan. And this is an opportunity for us to see how we're getting on. So there is some really key highlights that have been identified across all of the drivers. So for those who live and work, for example, we're working through our Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan, and that's currently receiving feedback from our First Nations peoples, and then there'll be an opportunity for non-First Nations people to provide feedback on that later in the year. Under 2, and I'm only picking one from each, and there are many, we've had loads of events in the immediate post-COVID time. People have flocked back to the Alpine Shire with over 55 events taking place, so the events team being kept wonderfully busy. A decision taken not very long ago was that we would defer our implementation of food organics, green organics. So there's been a lot of work to redo the education packages and make sure we're going to get our communications in place and recruiting for somebody within our customer service team to support that work. So that's all underway. In strategic driver 4, the Alpine Sport and Active Recreation Plan was adopted by Council. And in strategic driver 5, pleased to say that our gender equality action plan has been accepted by the Commissioner. So big pieces of work that we set out as major initiatives in our council plan are tracking well as we get to quarter 3. So the recommendation this evening is that Alpine Shire Council note that the quarterly performance report ending the 31st of March 2022.
So moved. Councillor Hughes and seconded Councillor Keeble. Councillor Hughes.
Big round of applause to all of the staff that are involved in getting these initiatives happening and continuing and over the line. You know, we do have, for a small municipality, we have a lot going on. And it's commendable to everybody involved, and that's, you know, internal staff as well as community stakeholders that are, you know, a part of a lot of the processes as well. I read a lot, and these draft plans are my forte in getting down and deep into them and really nutting out some things, as everyone here is aware. I've currently got my nose in the affordable housing and analysis and action plan. It's taken me 2 days to get 45 pages through, sorry, for that one that's going to be coming. But, you know, this is where I urge people also to, you know, we see them internally and we provide our feedback, and then that comes out to the community with a lot of these things that are happening. And this is where I urge people to get involved, to really understand the capacity that, you know, we are putting out there to the public to get all of these things, you know, based on what our council plan is trying to achieve. So I just urging people to keep reading, keep being aware, and commending those that are involved in getting them over the line as well.
Councillor Keeble.
Yeah, look, in spite of COVID, and I'm not sure it's post-COVID, I think it's post-lockdowns, we've had 55 maybe. Being at schools at the moment, we're well and truly still in COVID. But yeah, in spite of COVID, well done to everyone in the council and the community for not business as usual, but still getting things done, because there's lots of good work there, so thanks.
Any further comment, questions? Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms Havcroft has already mentioned this, but the FOGO implementation, so the green waste, which I probably get asked about on a weekly basis. So people are very, very keen for this implementation. Just a quick question, not sure if you can answer it. It just says here council is still discussing the final funding model with DELT, which is due for response at the end of April. I'm assuming that's April come and gone. And
Thank you, Councillor Prime. It has come and gone, and there is no agreement on how that funding model will play out. So we know that we are to receive some funding, but it's being split between FOGO and transfer station upgrades, and we haven't settled on where that money should most appropriately go, because we're going to implement immediately the FOGO and the transfer station upgrades as part of our capital works programme for next year. So we want to make sure that we can get best bang for buck for those two different projects. And it's not a huge amount of money, it's $220,000 in total, but how we split it will depend on what additional funding we might be able to secure from other sources. So it's not yet, sorry.
No, thank you very much for that. It's just good to see people excited about bins, so something to look forward to. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Havercroft, thanks. This is an excellent report, and again, another one that goes through the Audit and Risk Committee as well. Just a question on the aquatic facilities KPI. It's buried in there in Strategic Objective 1.4. It's the number of visits to aquatic facilities per head of population, and we've declared it at 1.45 at Q3. Am I right in interpreting that means, on average, each member of our community attends one of our swimming pools 1.4 times so far this year to date?
Councillor Kelly, that is correct. That is what the number's telling us.
Great, thank you.
So some people are going a lot.
Yes. Yeah, that's...
Okay, that's what it's telling us.
Thank you. Any further comments? No, take that one to the vote. All those in favour? Beautiful, thank you. 8.3.3, this is Ms Havercroft's night tonight. Submissions to the draft budget.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the first of 4 council reports that relate to the budget. It's the anticipation that will get us to the actual budget. So this is a report that details all of the internal, external submissions that we received as part of the public exhibition process of the budget. We received 16. All of the internal submissions have been wrapped up into number 16, hashtag number 16, and 15 external submissions were received. The report details the amendments to the budget as a result of those submissions. And I would like just to importantly note, I'm not going to read them all out, please take them as read, but that recommendation 4 is that we will go back out to all of the external submitters, provide them with written update of what is going to happen with their submission as a result, because 11 people chose to come into the council and meet with councillors and talk about their application, so we would like to follow that up. We will follow that up with the outcome of those discussions.
Thank you.
So the recommendation this evening is that Council considers written and verbal submissions received pursuant to the Council's community engagement policy in relation to the Alpine Shire Council's budget 2023 and makes the following as read amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Janis, and Councillor Kelly second. Councillor Janis.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it really is as read. There's been a lot of work go into the consultation with community members and staff submissions as well. And I think there's a couple of councillor ones may have been in there. I commend that we've done a reasonably good job in consulting with our residents about their submissions, and they will be, as recommendation 4 says, that we will communicate with them as to the reasonings why not they did not, their submission was successful or not. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Prime.
So I'll just have to offer a correction here because Councillor Kelly has been written up there, and I think you meant to say Councillor Prime.
I did.
You looked at-
Councillor Kelly
Yes.
Prime.
It's
Sorry,
what
Mr.
happens
Jeremy.
when your first name is a surname also.
Good pickup. Yeah, exactly. I just mumbled crime.
That's all right. I'm sure it won't be the last time this happens. No, this is a really good process. The people who I know who did some external submissions were really happy. There was council staff encouraging people to make submissions, and those who come and spoke in person, it was really appreciated. It's nice when you've got some background information about the proposal, and just the process I thought was really good all round, and really good that we'll be providing feedback to those submissions as well. That'll be very much appreciated, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Again, you know, having the people come in and talk to their submissions everyone was really passionate, and that's what we want to see, is the passion behind the ideas that people are wanting to do. And I really urge people, community groups, individuals, whoever it is, to continue to talk to each other as well. There's other ways in which certain projects can be funded if it can't be done through council, and it just comes down to having that conversation with people around town that might know of a different avenue. We can't do everything. Might not be able to do it in this one, but we could do it next year. So we continue to urge people to put forward their submissions and continue these processes. But yes, there are other avenues out there if you are unsuccessful, because there are a lot of community groups, as we've noted today, you know, Rotary and all of these other ones that people can be, you know, pointed towards to get these projects up and running as well. So thank you to everyone involved. It is a really big list of things to go through. But I just wanted to urge for people to, you know, that there are other avenues to look elsewhere as well.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Very simple question, thank you. And that is, pardon me, from the value in the draft budget to the amount to be adopted, I note that there's some that were in the draft budget that are not in the end budget, what the amount to be adopted. So is there any standout things that have had to drop out in order to put something in?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Please shout if I don't answer that question how you were anticipating. So the things that have been highlighted in the submissions are anything that might have been missing from the draft budget. So there are some things that have been added in. And unless the numbers of the other items have changed up or down in some circumstances, they're not listed here. So they are only so some of these are very small numbers. Some of these are tweaking around the edges of how we're working out the budget to get to as much detail as possible. But there hasn't been any big items that have fallen off completely from the budget between the draft and the final. Yep. But there has been some quite big movements in the amount of carry forwards that people you might expect. So what we notice is that at Q2, people remain very optimistic that they're going to spend their budget. And at Q3, there's a much more realistic assessment of their ability to really deliver on the key projects, both capital and operational. And that the draft budget was based on the Q3 numbers. And as that 1 month of opportunity, there's been further creep. So the difference between Q2 and Q3 this year to set us up for the draft budget for 22-23 is probably where the biggest changes happened, right, not in the draft and the final.
So I'll just pick out three that I can think of. Transfer station upgrades was originally 220 in the draft, but it's now 0 in the final. Does that mean that they've actually been done and paid for and therefore not in it, or are they not going to be done?
No, it plays to do we have the funding agreement yet? So the provision for expenditure must be matched against the income that we might receive. We don't know what that grant funding is going to look like and how we're going to match it yet. So we removed the 220 from the expenditure because we don't have any income to match it to.
Small plant and equipment renewal from 335 down to 105.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So back when we put the draft budget together, there was a forecast for the remaining plant that we'd ordered this year that hadn't yet been delivered. At that time, we were concerned that there were some quite large plant items that wouldn't arrive within this financial year. The good news story is that they have received. Therefore, the provision in next year's budget is lower than it would otherwise have been.
That answers it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Keeble.
I just noted, I just wanted to note in here, because we do have some members in the gallery who some of the additions here relate to in regards to Frida's Lane and landowners that abut Frida's Lane. And the second line in here, it says the value is not stated, but that's not to say that there's not a commitment to look at that part of Frida's Lane over the next 12 months and to provide some resources there. Is that would be correct in saying that, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So yes, that submission had three parts. One was looking at the unsealed section, which was to reassess provision for sealing that. There was a second part which related to the unformed section, which I think is the one that you're referring to. So our understanding is that it's in very poor condition, and it's got a blackberry infestation, and it's got some large ruts and large potholes. So the maintenance team have already done an assessment of that road to look at what could be done in the near term to tidy that up, so address the blackberries and address some of the access issues. But also the other part of that proposal was a proposal to restrict traffic just to those vehicles that need to use the lane to access their properties. So essentially keep recreational four-wheel drive use out of the lane. And that's something that we think is a positive idea, but we will engage with the relevant stakeholders, being the people who immediately abut that property, plus other people who might be using it, before we proceed with a proposal to put some provisions in to block that, which might be as simple as a bollard at either end that the relevant people have access to unlock, but it keeps those recreational four-wheel drivers out of the lane.
No, and if I may, Mayor Nicholas, wondering whether the riders would like to comment on that at all, or what's that?
Yep, absolutely.
Would you like to comment on that at all, in any sense? You don't have to. Just ask. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yep.
Just that you're here. I'm interested.
Exactly. Yep.
Just because it's a, No.
Yep.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Frida's Lane has been, since it was opened, and use that term very loosely, a stock route from way back in the 1850s. The adjoining landowners have no objection to anybody going up and down the whole time. And in fact, we see it as a possible extra shared trail around the Mount Beauty Toowoomba area, and that would tie in with the health and wellbeing policies you've got, as well as recreation and so forth. We've got no objection to any user whatsoever, and I've spoken to two of the other 4 landowners. They're in the same view, but that is for the section of Frida's Lane from Mountain Creek Road to Dams Road.
Yep.
Yes, sure, it's got some really big bog holes, but then the 18-year-olds in their Hiluxes and their first try of driving through mud have marvellous time, and we tow them out every so often. But by the same token, the Midder to Mount Beauty bike ride has used Frida's Lane to go through. People often walk through Frida's Lane. There are the 2 water courses, but they get through them. We just feel that Frida's Lane should be open to everybody to use, and that includes the horse riders as well. We just don't think it should become the preserve of one type of vehicle access.
Thank you, Sue. Could I just seek clarification? So your proposal is that it would remain open to recreational four-wheel drive use as currently, so we would try and accommodate all of those users through Frida's Lane?
Yes, it should be open to everybody. Vehicles, motorbikes, horses, cars, if they could get through, bushwalkers, push bikes, and our cattle going up and down, and ex-councillor Roper's cattle, because he moves between 2 properties. We mostly cross, but we do go along the lane with cattle in certain places.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point that was raised to me, which I think is a learning through this process, is to not lose heart, and that is we had a terrific presentation from a person who's volunteering their time to the Bright Skate Park, and I have it on good advice that it's the 20-something-year-olds that should be thanked by the teenagers in Mount Beauty in terms of how long it can take to have a great idea and build and develop something out. So don't lose heart and keep the momentum up in terms of pushing forward with your great ideas, because these things do snowball. Not to use a pun at the moment, but these things do gain momentum, and timelines can be shortened, but you do need a consistent approach there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Any further comments, questions? We'll take the one to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. 8.3.4, adoption of 22-23 rates and charges.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report relates to rates and charges for Appleton for 2022-23. It's principally that Council declares a rate increase of 1.75%, and the detail contained within the recommendations then sets out in great detail what each of those charges would be in addition to a rates increase. So this happens every year that we set out these amounts. What is a little bit different this year is that this usually sits within our budget report, so it doesn't come as 2 separate reports. So just from a point of paper generation, we received legal advice that it's best to really make it crystal clear what our charges are going to be so that we can reference back to them separate from the budget, where, with the best will in the world, it's rather a long document, so that information can very easily get buried. So there, Alpine Shire Council, like all other Victorian councils, is subject to a rates cap, and the rates cap is done on a go-fair basis, which is in line with inflation, although 1.75% might not be the inflation rate that lots of people would recognise right now, but it was set some time ago. And the fees and charges have been briefed on regularly. So the recommendations A, B and C are as a consequential result of they're the rates and the dollar charges. So that's the impact of the 1.75% rate increase done in a very complicated mathematical equation when mashed together with the valuation of properties. So those numbers probably to most people are completely meaningless. but they're an important number when being multiplied by the value which will appear on everybody's rates notice, the value of their properties. So when those two things are taken together, that's how the calculation for their rates is determined. The number, if I just pick A of 0.002750, is a 24.6% reduction over last year's rate in the dollar, which makes a big difference to how much is going to be multiplied by. But what's different this year from last year is that Alpine Shire, and this is true of many regional areas, saw quite a large increase in the value of their properties. It's not consistent for every property in every area, so there is ups and there's downs, but on the whole, there will be an increase in rates. So what people see in their rates notice, and it's manifestly just very complicated stuff, but what they see in their rates notice and what they hear as a 1.75% increase won't easily align together. So this year, and not really in the rates notice because these numbers are set out as a recommendation, is the communications that we'll do to try and help people understand how we get to those really long numbers and work out how we're going to charge individual ratepayers their rates and which bits that are capped. So the 1.75% is capped by the state government, and which bits are uncapped, and that we are claiming, we claim those rates and then we funnel them straight on to other people. We're just the administrative function on other people's behalf, because our rates notices can be very complicated. They're hard to understand. So we're working up the communications around that to help bring some clarity about how it's built up and what people might expect. So the recommendation this evening is that Council declares the rates and charges of nearly $20 million to be raised in the 22-23 financial year, featuring a 1.7% rate increase for the purposes of the Local Government Act 2020, based on setting the rates in the dollar and the charges as read in 1A to P, and declares the rates and charges must be paid by four instalments on or before the 30th of September, the 30th of November, the 28th of February and the 31st of May of next year, in accordance with the Local Government Act 1989.
Before we put the recommendation, can I just point of order question on this one? I've only just picked it up. The 8.3.5 recommendation is about the dinner plane special rate, and we've got to agree on that dinner plane special rate. In 8.38.41N says the dinner plane special service rate. E, sorry, is the dinner plane special rate at the rate in the dollar. I think we're supposed to be the other way around, aren't we?
Yep.
I think we have to do the dinner plane one first.
Yep.
Or we take the E out of there.
Yep, well
It
spotted.
should be the same as C. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're only charging 43% of what the general residential rate is as a dinner plane special rate. And the dinner plane special rate, by definition,
43.
is, I've got it here,
Special rate's 43.
be declared for the purpose of defraying expenses, first dinner for the period, and it is, the dinner plane special rate will apply to commercial industrial land within the dinner plane village as defined in the attached map. So if we then adopt this, you're only going to be paying 43% of the ordinary rate.
Yep. Helen, thank you. And
Have I got? I might have got it wrong. I just thought maybe.
Thank you. I think there's two separate questions.
Yep.
One is a point of clarification, and I can't take it on notice. I'd love to, because we're sitting here in the room. I don't think it really matters if we swap them around to make a decision that we're going to go with 43% to determine that rate in the dollar amount in this report. So I'm happy to do that, but I'll pick up Councillor Forsyth's point. So the the special rate in dinner plane hasn't always been 43%. It's decreased over time, but the rate in the dollar is worked out over time. So the value of the rate in the dollar, they don't match exactly because it used. I could get to the numbers, but it started off at 65% and then it's moved to 43% through the years. So the fact that they haven't been the same for the start, they haven't got the same starting point. So when it was 65%, it would have changed the rate in the dollar value, and that's the consequential effect of that change.
I just thought I'd raise in case it does matter,
Well,
that's all, but if it doesn't
let's
matter.
change it, just to be sure, and put, so we haven't got a motion on the table at the moment, so we can just park the discussion and go to item 8.3.5 and do special rate first, and then we've covered that one.
You fine with that? Yep.
Yep. Okay. And then you want to pursue your,
We've got, pardon me.
or you have you resolved with what Ms Suthercroft said is my question.
The identifying numbers on this section of the, up here are incorrect as well, sorry. You got 7.35, it's actually 8.35.
Ah, thank you. Okay. So we'll park 8.3.4 and move to 8.3.5, declaration of the dinner plane special rate on the,
I've got no.
point raised by point of order, raised by Councillor Keeble. And
Pretty sure we've done it the other way around.
I think it makes sense. So do we further discussion on the declaration of the dinner plane special rate? Are we ready to take it to a vote?
I think it really comes down to what it is actually saying here. If the special rate is declared at, it's item E, the amount of dinner plane special rate to be levied, so it's a levy over and above the normal rate.
Yep.
And we can agree here that it is 43% of the general rate as provided, and that's what we're all agreeing on. So I think we can agree with that. When we go back to the previous document, I think we need to change the amount in the dollar in that instance, otherwise it is not going to reflect a 1.3.
1.43.
Yeah, 1.3 or 143, whichever way you want to look at it, percent of the actual value.
Should we?
But the special rate is only the 43%.
The special rate is 43.
Yeah. So that's what we
Right.
should have reflected in 8.3, which is what's here, yeah.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I think we should decide upon this one, but
I
then
do
it
too,
might be
and then
very
we'll go.
it might be very helpful for my mathematic manager, corporate
Thank you.
Dennis, to come in and just answer the points.
A bit
just to
more, okay.
provide that
Well, let's-
clarification.
So
Let's put, sorry. Oh, did you? Let's put this one to the vote. Yep.
Which one?
So the 8.3.5, declaration of the dinner plane special rate. If there's no further discussion, it needs to be moved and seconded first.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Kelly, seconder.
No more discussion.
No more discussion. All those in favour? Beautiful. Okay, that is passed. So then we'll go back to 8.3.4.
Unless those figures are done
Can I
on
move this one then?
Go for it.
I'll move this
Yep,
Second.
so we can open discussion.
yep.
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Forsyth, seconded by Councillor Keeble. Discussion.
Right, so I think it's a semantic thing, and if it is correct, by simply declaring the dinner plane special rate at that value, which is 43% of the general rate, it is in addition to the general rate on a property. Is that the way it is going to be applied?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, the residents in Dinner Plain, the ratepayers in Dinner Plain are included in the general rate, and then we apply the 43% of the general rate as the Dinner Plain special rate, which takes them up equivalent to the commercial 143% differential.
Yeah, line C.
So, look, it's technical, and you make a very good point. We could explain this a little bit more clearly in future, but you've nailed it with what you've just said there.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr O'Keefe. Much appreciated. Any further comments on this item, rates and charges? Discussion? No?
No.
Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. I am concerned about inflationary pressures and what that means, not only for us as a council to deliver our budget, but also what it means for our ratepayers and to make their quarterly payments. I guess one thing I'd say is I'd encourage everyone to use all the services that are available, because that is a way to start saving some money. You know, go to the library, it's free, and you can save $1 doing that. Do we have a couple of questions, Ms Havercroft, if you don't mind? Just the first one being, do we have any measure of hardship on our ratepayers in terms of meeting their quarterly instalments or otherwise?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I don't have any data about hardship, but I can tell you that we offer time to pay arrangements for people who can demonstrate that they are struggling with their rates bills. But I don't have any statistics for you on what percentage that is.
And so for people who it's a matter of approaching council to test for eligibility to go onto that payment plan.
Correct.
Okay. Just the last question for me. The 1.75% rate cap, based on a figure that's quite different from where inflation is at. Did the budget get modelled on a different figure at all? So what if we chose 1.3%? How that would affect our budget's position?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. No, we didn't. We received notification on, I think, right up to the wire, very, very clear near the new year, that it would be 1.75%. And given our knowledge about the increasing cost of services, we modelled on 1.75, subject to other decisions being taken by council.
Or inflation at 5% or 5.1, I think. Okay, thanks very much, Ms Havercroft.
Councillor
Now
Campbell?
I have something to say. Yes, now that we've got through the numbers,
You're right.
and you know, A and E equals C there, that's fine, no worries. So it was done on 43%. So now we've got past that one. Thank you for moving the first one, this one. I think that was the right thing to do, just on a technical aspect. And so let's move back to the rates, which is where Councillor Kelly was moving to. You know, rates are something that we get on our properties once a year, and we can choose to pay them, you know, off in one hit or every quarter, or however it is you do your payment plan. It's a tax. It's not like the tax I get every fortnight that goes to another government. I think I see more of my shire rates than what I see of other taxes that I pay. And I know that we're a small shire. For the people out in the world out there, most of our income comes from rates as a small shire, unlike other shires who, you know, have meters in the streets and all that sort of stuff to charge people for parking. We don't do any of that. And I do think, you know, the way that we spend our rates, we can always argue about that. But I think if people look around our shire, the rates over the previous decade have been spent wisely on upgrades. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Hughes?
Rates is so much fun to talk about. There's a lot of confusion as to how properties are rated, because I'm constantly being asked, why has it gone up by this, or why would it be different if I lived in a different municipality, and things like that. Is there a level of simplified communication going out with these rates notices that will be assisting in this process?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So we are trying to do a ready reckoner so people could work out what their rates bill might look like. But there is, as you pointed out, such a fluctuation between small conurbations of houses in the rates, in the valuations that we've received, that almost what you are charged and what your neighbour is going to be charged won't match. And so it will be very hard for people to use it and get absolute clarity on what their rates bill is going to be. So the rates notices will be issued in late July, early August, and we're planning a series of communications up to that point to share how we're spending those rates as an organisation, but also to try and help demystify the calculate. And it is incredibly complicated for something that on the face of it would appear to be quite simple. And I'm desperately trying not to give people the information to work it out and then it not be what comes in their rates notices because of the uncapped items that would sit in there as well, or the changes between commercial or residential, and that there's so many different factors that it could create greater confusion, but we're attempting to simplify it. We'll have frequently asked questions for the customer service team so that they can talk people through their rates notices when they come in. And the customer service teams and the rates officers are used to this. Regardless of how it's calculated, there is always a lot of questions every year about people's rates notices and how they appeal them, and those things will form part of the communication. So same as last year, but we'll try to improve it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Yes, just on the rate notices, this is for everybody who is possibly listening online and also part of the communications that will go out. When the rate notices go out, hopefully we'll be able to highlight or define those things that are on the Alpine Shire rate notice that really have nothing to do with Alpine Shire. We are a collection agency for the state government, and that money just gets transferred directly to them. So I hope that that is defined well on the rate notices, so that if somebody sees that they've got rates that look to be, $400 or $500 more expensive than what they were last year, please have a look at what the statutory amounts are that are not coming back to the Shire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Janis. Bottom one.
I think the classic example of that is the fire services levy. Gone up 10 or 11% this year. The country and regional communities are not necessarily the main beneficiaries of that increase either. So I think there's a very good article in the Weekly Times recently in relation to spend for our fire services. So it's nothing to do with council, we simply collect the money.
Thank you. Any further comment or questions? I have a question following up from what Councillor Kelly asked about hardship. Do we offer a discount for elderly or unemployed or disadvantaged to perhaps listed with Centrelink or anything like that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is concessions for certain individuals. I wouldn't want to say now exactly what the detail is, but it's on our website under rates. There's are you eligible for a concession? And there are a few different groups of individuals who are, it's up to a certain amount of financial contribution.
Thank you. We'll take that one to the vote then. All those in favour? Passed. Thank you. Now we move on to adoption of the 2022-23 budget, 8.3.6.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the fourth of four budget-related reports, and is the crux, I suppose, of what money we will be receiving as revenue and spending in the 22-23 financial year. So this budget is based, as we've already seen, from a process of submissions and a bottom-up process within the council of what we believe we will realistically be able to receive in grants that we're already aware of, that are made up of our rates that will be incoming, and the financial assistance grants that we receive, and all of our operational and capital spend. Chuck all of those numbers into the budget, and broadly it comes out with our budget surplus of $5.5 million. And so that's based on receiving income of $36.8 million and expenditure of $31.3 million. The budget goes into enormous detail between operational and capital spend, with a huge capital project spend prediction of $18.84 million next year, which is, and I think this might have been said for 21-22, the biggest ever, and it is an unprecedented season of grant income. this budget is made up of $8.1 million worth of grant funding income, which is really, really large, and is supporting that huge capital works programme. There's not much else to say on it. It's fairly phenomenal. I think the success that the council officers have had in going out and seeking that grant funding, particularly in the capital works team, has been phenomenal. Now the commitment to deliver on those. And I think we've seen some of that in the Q3 report that we had earlier this evening, that there is difficulties getting contractors now. We're starting to notice that, and we're aware fuel costs are one, but lots of services costs are going up and up. And so the budget, whilst set, is done on our best endeavours to understand what we will receive and what we might be able to spend in the following year. But I think we have to lace it with a bit of realism that there probably will be some slippage at some time as we roll through the year on what we can get through. And we know that in conversations at briefings, we've talked about how we're engaging really closely with our funders to ensure that that money continues to be able to, don't have to give any of it back, but it might be spent at a later date than we'd originally signed up for. But despite that, so the budget, obviously now that we've just carried the rates increase of 1.75%, that has been, this budget is modelled on that basis, and produces a rates amount of income, which is the bulk of the income at just over $19 million that will sit in here. We've discussed the capital work programme, which is huge and very exciting, probably for the teams involved in that piece of work. Some of the team funding in 2023, 2022, 23 is changing. So bushfire recovery work, that team is scheduled to finish their work up. But I think very late in the day, since this draft has been prepared, we're hearing that there may be more funding around. We don't know how it's going to fall or what it will be for, but I suppose, I don't want to say bonanza, but the funding that is available is still large. So yes, I don't know if we want to go into lots of detail. It was a very long document. I think it's reflective of an organisation that is seeking to continue to deliver both operationally and on its capital projects with great ambition. It's a really large council plan of objectives, and the budget is built around those council plan major initiatives. So there's funding for those pieces in there, which were the subject of lots of conversations as we've been drafting up. So the recommendation this evening is that Council adopts the Alpine Shire Budget 22-23, incorporating the amendments adopted by Council in the submissions report at 8.3.3 of this meeting, and authorise the Acting Chief Executive Officer to give public notice of adoption of the budget, and delegates authority to the Acting Chief Executive to reflect any changes made by Council at tonight's meeting, which are not reflected in the budget document that we're just discussing and is an attachment to this report.
So moved.
Moved, Councillor Forsyth, seconded Councillor Keeble. Councillor Forsyth.
I think we had our discussion at item 8.3.3 on the changes to the final budget, so I have nothing else to say on this one.
Councillor Keeble.
Other than to say that, other than the CEO employment, this is the second most important document that we get right every year, because without getting money into the budget, things don't happen, and it's always a juggle about what to put in and what to leave out. I think only a few years ago we said, wow, we got $10 million in capital works, and now we're at 18 million. It's more than what we ever thought we would do, and I wish Will's team and all the officers well in getting this work done over the next 12 months.
Further comments, questions? Councillor Janus.
Just a question for Mr Havercroft. We speak highly of the capital works programs that we're going to deliver, and Mr Jeremy will be very busy with his team doing that. Are you hopeful, or have we received any extra funding from government to improve our customer service systems going forward and working collaboratively with any of our other councils. Do we have a plan to spend more money on that?
Thank you, Councillor Janice. So we're in the throes of working through our customer service system with some really exciting changes coming in the very near future, but they're not reflected in this budget. So we also received from Rural Council Transformation Funding an announcement just on the 26th of May, I believe, that we had been successful in receiving across 3 councils, Tawong, Indigo and ourselves, $750,000 for supporting us to understand our systems and our processes and put in a integrated IT system for planning and building. But again, that came too late for the budget, so both the funding and how we're going to spend that don't sit in this at the moment in great detail. So unfortunately, that's not reflected in this budget. But yes, they're both pieces of work that should help support the customer service team to deliver a better customer service day in, day out when they're on the phones and taking emails.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very important. It's great to build things, but there's a lot of backroom work that goes to support all that building that's happening and capital works within our team. So it's important to recognise the other side of the equation as well. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Havercroft, just one question. On the forward plan on FTE headcount, there's a bit of a peak and then it trails off by around 10%. Am I right when I get asked about that, saying that that's largely explained by the peak in capital works that's in the budget, or is there some sort of other efficiency, in terms of resourcing and how we complete our work?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. There's principally 2 drivers for the almost blip, I suppose, and then it goes back down. One is, yes, we're growing the team to respond to the capital works programme that we want to deliver. And 2, it's the ending of the bushfire recovery, which is broadly funded FTE. So those individuals, when the funding ends, their roles will end as well. So that will lower the FTE numbers accordingly.
Great, thank you.
Any further comment or question? Take that one to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Beauty. There is an enormous amount of work in rates, charges and budget, as you can tell from the discussion and the papers. And we mentioned a couple of times how confusing rates are in our discussion tonight, so just how confusing they can be. And I just wanted to really thank Dennis O'Keefe, our new Manager of Corporate, to being here and we're doing the work, or being instrumental in making it all happen and pulling it together, as well as being here tonight to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you.
And we will move right along to instruments of delegation 8.3.7 and 8.3.8, which I will take together. There's an instrument of delegation and an instrument of appointment and authorisation.
So moved.
So, okay. Tony Kebble's moved them both. John Forsyth second.
I should put my hand up. I apologise.
That's all right. I heard you. So, Councillor Keeble.
Nothing there. Just business. Yep.
Requirement for the for the role. Okay. Any further comment, question? No. All those in favour? The two recommendations both passed. Thank you. The next item is 8.3.9. Bright's Iconic Rod Run, designation of alcohol restrictions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report is to recommend to Council approves restrictions on the consumption of liquor on Council land under our community local laws during the Bright Iconic Rod Run in 2022. So the Rod Run event of 2019, Council introduced restrictions on the consumption of liquor on Council land for the duration of the event under clause 2.2.1 of our community local law. These restrictions were based on the recommendation of the Events Risk Assessment Panel, consisting of council officers, Victoria Police, Ambulance Victoria, Alpine Health and other emergency service agencies. The 2020 official Rod Run event was cancelled in the lead up to the event due to uncertainty over travel restrictions and COVID. However, Council endorsed that at the 7th of April 2020 Ordinary Council meeting, a recommendation of the Events Risk Assessment Panel that consumption of alcohol restrictions be implemented as per 2019. The restrictions were implemented in 2020 as endorsed by Council at the April meeting. The 2021 it's another tongue twister, Rod Run event was cancelled for the same reasons as 2020. In the planning up to the 2021 event, the Rod Run and Custom Club made a request for the footprint of the consumption of alcohol restricted area to be considered and reduced to a smaller scale. The request was considered and a recommendation presented to Council on the 3rd of August 2021. At that meeting, councillors endorsed the recommendation as made to reduce the restricted area for the consumption of alcohol. And it's on that basis that this recommendation is presented today, that they continue with the reduced area of restriction as seen in the attached map, and that's the position for the 2022 Rod Run. At this stage, we haven't issued an events permit. We're in the process of commencing negotiations with both Rod Run and Custom Club, but they have indicated that they are comfortable with that being what will go into their events permit.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Jenner, seconded Councillor Kelly. Simon Kelly. Councillor Janus.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I think the two important things for in this report are, number one, that it's been assessed by the risk assessment panel and recommended, and secondly, that the principal organisers, the Bright Rod and Custom Car Club, are also in agreement with that. And I note in recommendation 3 that council officers will work with licensed operators in the designated area about operating responsibly within their red line area of operation for consumption of alcohol. I think that's an important matter to be dealt with in the long term, and I wish the club a very good event. I'll be attending there, having a good look, and I hope it all goes well and they have fine weather.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. I would support everything that Councillor Janus said there around the risk assessment panel. Something for me on this event, because I'm always amazed at how divisive it can be amongst some of our community, and personally I love the cars and the passion, but I do want everyone to have a safe time. And in thinking through the recommendations here, something came to mind to me around the benefits of self-regulation and finding ways to incentivise everyone to follow the restrictions put in place. And the Red Frogs started in 1997. The Red Frogs are a not-for-profit group, and they attend festivals as volunteers to help people stay safe. And why are they called the Red Frogs? They hand out red frogs to people who maybe drunk too much or need some kind of care.
An experience you want to share with us?
Yeah. I'm not saying the Red Frogs are suited to this event or it makes sense, but I guess what I would recommend to the Bright Rod and Custom Club is to think about some creative ways to support their attendees following these requirements. It will make for a safer event and continue that social licence of this event here in Bright. So I've said my piece. Red Frogs.
Did you bring some? Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Any further comment, discussion? Councillor Janus.
Just following on from the last comments, I note you have a red tie.
With a frog on it.
A couple of years ago, I did approach Vic Roads to attend with the tent, and that tent I saw at the Dedarang races, in actual fact, to offer, advice about drink driving, etc. And unfortunately, Vic Roads believed that this event didn't need their attendance, and they thought it was a funding issue for them. So that was truly disappointing for me in that, and that they, wouldn't support something like this going forward. Just having someone there to represent it. So, and they're our main body for driver behaviours.
Councillor Hughes.
there hasn't been official rod runs over the last few years for various reasons, and however, there has been, if that still makes sense. You know, it hasn't been an official event, but the cars are still here, the people have still come, Bright's still full. So in the eyes of this type of plan going forward, you know, it was put in place and adhered to over that time period anyway. So it's not that it hasn't been used with their actual event. We have to kind of look at this as it has been, because people were still here. We still had the influx. So people don't like change, but I feel like people are more accepting of change with everything that's gone on in the last couple of years. And it's not saying that you can't come and enjoy the rod run. It's just saying be responsible. And, you know, if you want to have a drink, then do it with your friends in your backyard or where you're staying and things like that, and be responsible about it, because it's, you know, there are people who choose not to drink, and you need to be respectful of those people that are wanting to enjoy the same festivities as those that are there for that same reason as well. So I think that, you know, with consultation with the car club and the rod run club, that, you know, they're supportive of this, and the fact that council, you know, are going to be talking to the licensed premises around that have that capacity to look at where their red line is. You know, that's working with all parties to have a good space moving forward. So that's my piece.
Any further discussion, questions? Take that to the vote. All those in favour? Terrific. 8.3.10. Airport services lease for aircraft at Tonka Aerodrome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report seeks approval to execute a lease for an aircraft hangar at the Tonka Aerodrome on land contained in Lot 1, plan of the subdivision at 266 Buckland Valley Road, Tonka, for a 10-year term with the option for additional 10 years. The aerodrome master plan has set out that we would be placing hangars on the Tonka airfield, and we commenced at the appropriate moment some community consultation about who should have those hangars and invited submissions. And this is the effects of that decision some time ago. Those leases are just coming through now. I believe there was one at the last council meeting as well. So this is just the lease for another hangar.
Councillor Forsyth's moved. Recommendation, seconder. Councillor Prime. Thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you. I think it's just a continuation of what we've already started, and no doubt there's some more hangars to go in future, is there?
There is, Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you.
Councillor Prime.
Yeah, I concur with that note. Nothing from me.
Any comment, discussion, questions? No. Take that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Item 8.3, okay, 11. Planning Scheme Amendment C62 API.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is for noting, for two, I think, important reasons. One, to celebrate that our planning policy framework translation was successful and was adopted on the 26th of May. Councillors will remember that was a large piece of the strategic planning team's work last year to reduce our planning scheme information down from 26,000 words to a little over 13,000 words, and making it more simple in a policy neutral fashion for our teams to work with, but also our community to understand. What that meant for the following two reports is that when that was adopted on the 26th of May, these reports were already written and prepared. So the clauses that are referenced in the reports that follow have the old planning scheme numbers in them, and not the new numbers that will be seen in our planning scheme if you looked onto the internet today, because they are now under our planning policy framework as amended on the 26th of May. So it's just to draw everyone's attention to if you went and looked up those numbers now, they wouldn't naturally match, but it is only then, because it was a policy neutral piece of work, it is only the numbers that have changed and not the sentiment of the actions that are being undertaken. So the rest.
Councillor Janis, and seconded Councillor Prime. Councillor Janis.
I think It's just a governance and administrative recommendation or move, so
Thank you.
nothing further to say.
Yeah, nothing from me.
Councillor Forsyth.
Just one question, and that is you've referred, thank you, Ms Abercroft, to the next two items. If either of those items go before VCAT, will the documents that they rely upon reflect this new planning scheme amendment, or will they still go through with the old, under the old recommendations?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So our understanding, and lots of councils are going through this at the moment, is that papers presented to VCAT are done under the planning scheme as it is at the time that it goes to VCAT. So these would be changed so that they reference the new clauses in the framework.
Any further questions or comment? No, we'll take that one to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Just wanted to clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms Havercroft, but that was a state government requirement to rewrite it, or to change the planning scheme into a new structure, as well as the rewrite in a policy neutral way. So it hasn't, as you've said at the beginning, it hasn't changed, but it's now in a different format, so it's easier to see.
Thank you, Madam
Sorry,
Mayor.
I should have done that
Apparently it
earlier.
is in an easier format to understand.
Yep.
It's still fairly complicated
Okay.
stuff.
Sure.
But it was a statewide initiative, and it forms part of the Victorian planning reforms that are being undertaken.
Thank you. 8.3.12, planning application, Old Ovens Highway, Myrtleford. Ms Havercroft.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this is a proposal that involves the construction of a dwelling and outbuildings on a piece of farming zoned land at Old Ovens Highway, Myrtleford. The proposed dwellings has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a separate laundry, open plan family and kitchen area. It's decked on 2 sides. It comes with the associated wastewater disposal facilities that it would require. And it is, the application is for a dwelling to support the farming activities that they propose to undertake on that land. There's lots of pages of pictures relating to it. There was quite a lot of objections to this application, and a planning forum took place where the objectors and the applicants were able to meet, and the person who prepared the farm plan on behalf of the applicants was also present and was able to talk through the viability as he saw it of the farm plan and the reasons why the farm would be a productive and viable farm on the land. The objections had covered a broad range of issues, but if I pick out, I think, probably the top 3, and on a recommendation from a councillor some time ago, we've now ordered the objections and our responses in where we see the most important elements first, and then drop down to things where VCAT often wouldn't consider them to be an objection at all. For example, valuation of somebody else's property. So concerns were raised around the agriculture and the farming activities on the site as submitted in the farm plan, and our own assessment of the farm plan, the council officer's assessment of the farm plan, which is done independently from a farm agricultural firm, is that it wouldn't be viable. But the concerns were similar, that it wouldn't be viable under the current items that they would like to farm at the moment, that the septic system siting gave them concerns that there would be tree root damage, and that there would be traffic impact concerns on Munro Lane and the current shared access way that the neighbouring properties and this property share. I think the planning forum was a really good opportunity for everybody to share their concerns about this site, but the planning assessor's determination of the application is the recommendation that you have this evening, that we will refuse this application for a dwelling on farm land at Old Ovens Highway, Myrtleford, because it doesn't meet with the state and local planning sections of our planning scheme.
Moved councillor Prime. Seconded councillor Forsyth. Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one question, Ms Havercroft. This refusal to this does not actually stop anyone from actually farming the land. It's just the proposed dwelling that's attached to the farm plan.
Thank you, Councillor Prime. Yes, the refusal is based on the basis that there's no viable farm plan, therefore there's no need for a dwelling on this farming zone land.
Thank you. So fairly thorough report here. I was able to attend this forum as well. And some really good discussions held that day. Good to see there's an independent party involved here in assessing the farm plan as well and running their eye over everything there. These are always tough decisions. And it's noted here at the start of the item that the land adjacent is probably a similar-ish size, and probably something we mention nearly every time a planning application comes before us is we just have to accept it on its own merits, and nothing else is sort of setting a standard or a precedent there. So I'm happy to support this officer recommendation tonight.
Councillor Forsyth.
Yes, I think this, as Councillor Prime's just pointed out, the surrounding land holdings are of a similar size, and nearly all of them have a building on them or a dwelling already. This pocket of land is, on the western side is the Great Alpine Road, and on the eastern, northern and southern sides it's surrounded by Crown land, bush. It's a little pocket of land that is in itself 10 hectares, I believe, 10.1 hectares. It really comes to the question in the Alpine Shire, if somebody has a dream and they own a piece of land this size and they'd really like to farm it and farm it intensively, under our current script with the planning department, they cannot get a house unless they can come up with a viable farm plan. Now, who's to say what a viable farm plan is? Having read the independent report, they questioned two of the items that have been put into the farm plan. These things have never been tried here before, so how can they really say that they're not going to work? So it really does question, and I have difficulty sitting as a councillor adjudicating on something like this, where somebody has a dream and could possibly do something that would be of benefit, freeing up a house in town, which we desperately need, if they are prepared to build their own house. And what constitutes viable anyway? Is it that they can make $100,000 a year out of it, or is they make $10,000 a year out of it? I don't know what the return per hectare should be to make it viable, because that is not a parameter that is used. So, yeah, I mean, I have consternation about this one.
Further comments, questions? Yep. Councillor Hughes.
The surrounding land owners with dwellings, do they have farm plans in place on their properties that we're aware of?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I would have to take it on notice whether they have farm plans. They are established properties, and I don't even know if the same planning scheme rules applied at the time that they would have applied for their properties to be built. Sorry.
The other question I have is, they had an independent consultant who essentially did up their farm plan for submission with the application, who have then in turn said that this is a legitimate idea to move forward with, hence why the application was put in place in the first place. What expertise, I suppose, do we have from our side to say that that consultant is incorrect?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So the task of producing a farm plan is that it sets out, for the applicant, it's setting out how that land may be used across a range of soil types and drainage and all sorts of things. The task very specifically for our farm expert, the plan expert who we have independently reviewed, is one of viability. So whether the things that they've presented stacks up. So they're coming at them from slightly different perspectives. We're not calling into question that individual's expertise to design farms or farm management plans or farm plans at all. It's just that they are being asked slightly different questions of one another. And the planning scheme asks us to determine whether the construction of that dwelling enhances the use of that agricultural land, that there is a house absolutely critical to support that farming endeavour from taking place. And the outcome in this scenario was that it's not a viable farm plan, so it doesn't stack up that they would require a property to support that farming endeavour, which is a slightly different question than the applicant would have asked for their farm plan to be designed.
Further question? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well.
One more time, Ms. Havercroft. If this does get approved, what's the compliance follow-up like to see if someone's following through with a farm plan? If you know the answer, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Prime. So the recommendation this evening is that it's refused. So if councillors follow that recommendation, the applicants have the option to object to VCAT, that they believe it is viable or whatever grounds that they choose. If you overturn the recommendation of the officers, then it would be a situation of normal compliance. There is no property on there at the moment, so they would have to build. They would have the rights to build, and we would determine whether we would like to, if the objectors would like to take that to VCAT. So it's either the applicant or the objectors. But as there's they can farm without the dwelling, so they can farm as they wish if they don't want to build a house. It's just the construction of a dwelling, which we might notice if they started constructing a dwelling without permission.
Thank you.
Question. Yeah, you. I was going to ask a question, but you go first. I'll go last.
The buildings that surround it and were part of the objection process are historic buildings, have historically been there for as long as I can remember. I note that there is a new construction occurring on one building, and I'm assuming that will be to replace an older building there, and there on the other side there are extensions taking place. And I certainly take Councillor Forsyth's comments seriously, and it's a difficult thing to sit here and knock back someone's aspirations going forward. But equally, the council's been caught before where people have put plans to council to do certain types of farming, built the house, and that farming was just not viable at all, and it's left us with a situation where we've got a house on farming land that is not properly being farmed and could otherwise be used for agricultural purposes of whatever. Looking at the farm plan itself and what they want to put there is that I see nothing other than the chickens that would require a presence of people on the property, and doing the math with free-range chickens, that you're not going to get, I don't believe anyway, an income from 90 chooks to, support yourself. The other part of the farm plan is going to take some years to get any income back at all, probably 7 years, in my view. But what does it should the applicant put a different proposal to council or take a decision to VCAT? and that may be where it might end up, but I'm conscious of the fact that if we have had advice that this is not a viable proposition, and then we are then left with farmland or agricultural land that's not going to be used for anything else other than a lifestyle.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis, further? Okay, we'll take this one to the vote. All those in favour of the current recommendation that a refusal be issued for the proposed use and buildings? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you for the discussion. Next item is 8.3.13, planning application 3 Huffs Lane, Bright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I start referring through the report, I just wanted to make a point of clarification. So in this report, it is observed that the applicant made no response to the objections. It's been brought to my attention that by the applicants that they weren't in receipt of the objections, so we're not given an opportunity to respond. So that piece of the report is incorrect, and I apologise to her for that. Additionally, she didn't know it was coming to the council meeting this evening, so we failed to notify her appropriately that this application was coming to council tonight. So I apologise for both of those items. So this evening, this application is for a 2-lot subdivision in Bright. It is on Hoffs Lane, which for those who know Hoffs Lane is a steep road off the Great Alpine Road on the way out of town towards Harrietsville. It is a currently vacant plot of land. It is, the proposal is both the subdivision and the building envelopes of the land, and the conditions follow that. So the intent here is that properties will be developed on these plots. And so the conditions set out in more detail than the subdivision alone would about how drainage matters need to be dealt with, etc. So the both lots are fairly similar in that they're described as irregular in size, with quite similar road frontages. You can see from the pictures that they're described as irregular. They're fairly standard looking blocks with the building envelopes towards the centre of the space. There is an application with this building subdivision for the removal of some small trees. They're of 0.120 hectares. This has got a biodiversity value of 0.176, and there will be an offset to compensate for that as one of the conditions contained within this application. The recommendation this evening is to grant permission for this subdivision to take place, as it's generally in accordance with the state and local planning regulations.
Moved by Councillor Kelly and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think I can understand, an objection to this. It's a lovely aspected area, but I think we have to support the conditions that DELP have identified and support housing in our communities. So, I'm supportive of this proposal.
Councillor Hughes.
This is a rare parcel of land in close proximity to Bright that still is going to be providing a decent size, even being split in two. When we were briefed on this, my questions were on drainage, because being on the hill that it is, it has proven to be interesting with water runoff on various properties along that stretch. So it's good to see that there are conditions there that will be addressing that aspect of it. But in terms of land size, it's not out of character. They're not splitting it in 6. They're not tiny little, parcels. That's just my observation.
Any further comment, questions? No, take it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. So ends the end of those sorts of decision-y ones. Section 9 is informal meetings of councillors, and there is a list of briefing sessions, etc. in the paper. Moved, Councillor Hughes, thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Keeble. Any comments, questions? No. Additions? Take the recommendation to the vote that we receive the summary. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 10, presentation of reports by delegates, which there are none tonight. General business, number 11 from my left, Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mayor Nicholas. I think I said my general business at the start.
Thanks. Councillor Kelly.
Nothing further, thanks.
Councillor Hughes.
We do get some wonderful opportunities here in the Alpine Shire. One of those is happening next week, where we have the Australian of the Year, Dylan Olcott, coming, sports champion, advocate. This is, I really urge people, like our schools and community groups are having an opportunity to be in on a couple of these sessions, but there is one that's open for the public to register, that's free, and I really urge people to do it. It's in Myrtleford next Wednesday at 7 p.m, and this is an opportunity. I've been to quite a few of these types of events, and I find them people are really engaged and can actually get a lot from these, learning from the people who they do see in that superior role publicly. And I think it's a really, really good thing for our children to be exposed to this level of inclusion as well. So, you know, hands down to the team who enabled this, because I think for a community to have this type of leadership in our area accessible for many is really good. So if people can register, if there's still space, Will? Let's get his hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Could I make a comment that the tickets have sold out?
Oh.
Already, yep.
Okay, well,
300 tickets. 300 tickets went in under 36 hours for that event.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, you know, and if you do see these things pop up, I really urge you to register when you see them, and talk to people around you that might also be interested in it for that very reason. They've sold out. But, you know, it's such a fantastic thing to be able to have people like Dylan come and speak. So congratulations to everyone involved, and I'm excited to sit in on one of these sessions myself.
Yep.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Janus.
Thank you. I think it's to Mr. Jeremy, and I appreciate that you might want to take it on notice. Have we got any progress reports in relation to our local laws for the proposed cat curfew laws?
Good question.
Maybe, sorry,
Thank you,
the wrong
Councillor
director.
Janice. No, it's no problem at all. I don't have an update on the cat curfew laws, apart from I hear from our planning compliance coordinator regularly that he hasn't forgotten that he's supposed to be doing it in the first quarter of 2022. And I appreciate that we are now beyond that timeline, but he is absolutely chock-a-block with planning compliance, reactive planning compliance issues at the moment. Yeah. So he hasn't got to it, but is very conscious that he's committed to doing that piece of work.
Thank you. I just thought I'd bring it to the attention of staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prime.
No, none from me. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
None? I'm going to follow on from Councillor Hughes, as usual. She takes my thunder.
Sorry.
But there is another fabulous presentation coming up called the Resilience Project, which is something that I'm certainly be going to, and I'm trying to get my daughter there. That will be on June the 20th in Bright, 21st in Mount Beauty, and 22nd in Myrtleford. So really great sort of mental health and how to make sure that you do glass half full, not half empty. Some learning some tricks around that. So good opportunity. And another two opportunities coming up are community grants funding and event funding also open. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think their applications are closed on the 30th of June. Is that correct? Yes. So there is some information in the local paper and on our website for people who have an event or are after some help with their community group or in the Shire. So there'll be some opportunities. And that's all from me tonight. And
Documents for signature.
yep, we have no motions for which notice has previously been given. We have a reception and reading of petitions, and we have a petition which I will ask Mr. Jeremy to talk to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the recommendation tonight is that Council notes and receives a petition pertaining to safety issues related to mountain bike traffic on Mystic Lane since the installation of the Hero Trail and the formation of the Alpine Community Plantation Group in 2013. So a report will be tabled at the next ordinary council meeting, which is in July 2022.
Moved. I'm just checking that we do actually need to. We've done this before, and yeah, there you go. We note and receive, but it's not a recommendation.
No.
So we just move through. Thank you. Item 14 is documents for sealing, and this one does need a mover and a seconder.
I haven't done it for a while.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble, as a mover, and a seconder, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Kelly, thank you. All those, yeah, that's right. All those in favour, or, yep. Yep, sure you'd interrupt me if you had something you wanted to say. I'm rushing to the end of this, in case you can't tell. There being no further business, the meeting is closed at 19:39. Thank you. And thank you for the gallery in particular.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,